December 14th, 1942. Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland. The wind cuts across the frozen testing range like a blade. George Hyde stands in the observation bunker, his breath fogging in the unheated concrete space, watching a demonstration that should fill him with dread. 50 yards downrange, a soldier raises a Thompson submachine gun, the weapon that won America the Great War, the gun that John Dillinger made infamous, the pride of American military engineering. The Thompson's polished walnut stock gleams even in the gray winter light. Its machined receiver, crafted with the precision of a Swiss watch, represents over 40 hours of skilled labor. It costs $200 to manufacture. In 1942 dollars, that's more than most American workers earn in a month. The Thompson roars to life. 45 caliber rounds punch through target after target with devastating accuracy. The weapon performs flawlessly, as it always does in controlled conditions. Hyde watches without emotion. He's seen this dance before. Colonel Rene Studler, chief of the Small Arms Branch, stands beside Hyde with his arms crossed. Studler is a career officer, a man who believes in tradition and proven technology. He doesn't look at Hyde when he speaks. "That's what we need, Mr. Hyde. 10,000 of them. 20,000. 50,000. His voice carries the weight of desperate arithmetic. "But we can't build them fast enough. We can't afford to build them fast enough. The Ordnance Department estimates we'll need 3 million submachine guns before this war ends." Hyde does the math instantly. 3 million Thompsons at $200 each. $600 million. And that's just for one weapon type. The calculation doesn't include the machine tools that would need to be manufactured, the skilled machinists who don't exist in sufficient numbers, the months or years it would take to train them. Studler finally turns to face him. "I need you to design a submachine gun that costs less than $20 to produce, and I need it in 60 days. The request is absurd, insulting even. You don't replace a masterpiece with a budget substitute. You don't ask an engineer to violate every principle of firearms design he learned at Springfield Armory. The Thompson works because it's overbuilt, over-engineered, crafted with the precision of a Swiss watch. How do you make something for 1/10 the cost that performs the same function?" Hyde looks back at the range. The demonstration soldier is now field stripping the Thompson, laying out its dozens of precisely machined parts on a canvas cloth. Each component requires specialized equipment and skilled hands to manufacture. The bolt alone takes 3 hours to machine. The barrel demands precision boring. The stock needs woodworking expertise. $20, he says. It's not a question. He's confirming the parameters of an impossible problem. $20, Studler repeats. Maximum, preferably less. Hyde thinks about the war. Not the abstract concept of war, but the specific material reality of it. America entered this conflict 1 year ago, and already the demand for weapons has exceeded every projection. Factories that once made automobiles now make tanks. Plants that manufactured typewriters now produce M1 Garands. The entire industrial capacity of the nation has pivoted toward a single purpose: producing enough material to fight on 2 fronts simultaneously across 2 oceans against enemies who started preparing years earlier. And submachine guns are critical. Not for glory. The Thompson may have a romantic reputation, but its real value is tactical. In close quarters combat, in the brutal house-to-house fighting that defines urban warfare, in the chaotic scramble of beach landings and jungle patrols, a soldier needs sustained automatic fire in a compact package. The submachine gun isn't elegant, but it's necessary. He asks, "What about performance standards?" Studler hands him a folder. Inside are specifications, rate of fire, effective range, reliability requirements, weight limits. Hyde scans them quickly. They're essentially the Thompson specifications, maybe slightly relaxed. The Army wants the same capability for 1/10 the cost. There's something else, Studler adds. It needs to work for infantry with minimal training. We're drafting men who've never touched a firearm, farm boys and city kids. The weapon needs to be simple enough that they can maintain it in the field without an armorer present. Hyde closes the folder. In his mind, he's already beginning the most radical redesign of his career. Everything he knows about firearms manufacturing is built on precision, tight tolerances, machined surfaces, carefully fitted components. To hit a $20 price point, he'll need to throw all of that away. He'll need to think like a factory owner, not a gunsmith. 60 days, he confirms. 60 days, Studler says. The testing board meets mid-February. If you can deliver a prototype that works, actually works, Mr. Hyde, not just on paper, we'll run it through trials immediately. As Hyde leaves the proving ground, he's already sketching in his mind. Not with precision tools, but with the industrial processes he saw revolutionize automobile manufacturing in Detroit. Stamping instead of machining, welding instead of fitting. Simplification at every level. He's going to build a gun that will make traditional gunsmiths weep. And if he's successful, it will help win a war. January 8, 1943. Inland Manufacturing Division, Dayton, Ohio. George Hyde's workshop looks nothing like a traditional gun manufactory. There are no rows of milling machines, no skilled craftsmen bent over lathes, no racks of precision measuring instruments. Instead, the space resembles an automotive stamping plant compressed into a single large room. Sheet metal lies stacked against one wall. A spot welding station occupies the center. Templates and dies crowd a workbench that runs the length of the eastern wall. Hyde hasn't slept more than 4 hours a night since leaving Aberdeen. The design that's emerging on his drafting table violates every aesthetic principle of firearms design, and he knows it. But aesthetics require time and money, neither of which exist in sufficient quantity. He picks up the prototype receiver, if you can call it that. It's 2 pieces of stamped steel, pressed into half cylinders, then welded together along the seams. The welds are ugly, functional, brutish. No machining, no finishing, no polish. The entire receiver took 45 minutes to produce, including welding time. A Thompson receiver takes 2 days. Frederick Sampson, the inland production manager, stands in the doorway watching. Sampson spent 20 years in automotive manufacturing before the war effort brought him to firearms. He understands Hyde's vision better than most military officers would. It looks like something a plumber built in his garage, Sampson says. It's not a criticism, just an observation. That's the point, Hyde replies. He's holding the receiver up to the light, checking the weld integrity. Every curve, every surface. If it can be stamped instead of machined, we stamp it. If it can be welded instead of screwed together, we weld it. If a part doesn't affect function, we eliminate it. The complete prototype sits on the workbench like an accusation against traditional gunsmithing. The stock isn't wood. It's a simple metal wire frame that retracts into the receiver. Hyde welded it himself. No furniture, no grip panels, no decorative elements whatsoever. The barrel is smooth steel, no rifling near the chamber where it isn't needed. Even the bolt is simplified, a single piece of machined steel with the absolute minimum geometry required to strip rounds from the magazine and chamber them. Sampson picks up the prototype carefully. It weighs, 8 pounds? 7.5, Hyde corrects. The Thompson weighs 10.5. Every ounce matters when you're carrying it through a jungle or across a beach. The feed system is perhaps the most radical departure. Hyde eliminated the Thompson's complex box magazine entirely. Instead, the weapon feeds from a simple double-stack single-feed magazine that holds 30 rounds. The magazine itself is stamped steel, cheap, disposable, easily manufactured. If a magazine gets damaged in the field, a soldier can throw it away without guilt. Try that with a Thompson's precisely machined box magazine that costs $3 to produce. What's the round count? Sampson asks. I'm designing for 400 rounds per minute, slower than the Thompson 700, but it makes the weapon more controllable, less ammunition wasted. Hyde moves to the firing mechanism. This is where his genius, or his heresy, depending on who's judging, becomes most apparent. The Thompson uses a delayed blowback system with a complex locking mechanism. Beautiful engineering, but expensive and unnecessary for a .45 caliber submachine gun. Hyde's design uses straight blowback. The bolt's weight and the recoil spring's tension are the only things keeping the weapon from firing out of battery. It's crude. It's also utterly reliable. "Show me the parts count," Sampson says. Hyde opens a wooden case. Inside, laid out on felt, are all the components of Hyde's submachine gun. Sampson silently counts them. 47 parts, Sampson finally says. The Thompson has over 70. 47 parts, Hyde confirms, and of those only 5 require precision machining: the bolt, the barrel, the trigger mechanism, the firing pin, and the ejector. Everything else is stamped, welded, or bent sheet metal. A semi-skilled worker can assemble this weapon in 30 minutes. Sampson sets down the prototype and walks to the window. Outside, in the gray January afternoon, workers are streaming out of the main manufacturing building. Shift change. These are the people who will build Hyde's weapon if it's approved. Not master gunsmiths, but factory workers who 3 years ago were making refrigerators and automobile fenders. "The Army's gonna hate it," Sampson says. "I know. The ordnance officers are gonna call it junk. They're gonna say it looks like you made it in a prison workshop." "I know that too. So why build it?" Hyde joined Sampson at the window. "Because we're not trying to win a beauty contest. We're trying to arm 3 million soldiers in the next 2 years. The Thompson is a magnificent weapon for a peacetime military with unlimited budget and time. But we're in a different war now. We need weapons that work everywhere, that anyone can maintain, that we can produce faster than the enemy can destroy them." He picks up the prototype again, feeling its weight, its balance. This gun won't jam in the mud because there's nothing to jam. It won't break in the cold because there's nothing complex enough to break. It won't fail in the hands of an 18-year-old farm kid from Iowa because there's nothing to operate wrong. You pull the trigger, it fires. You release the trigger, it stops. That's the entire manual. "What are you calling it?" Sampson asks. "The Army will assign it a designation if it's approved. For now, I'm just calling it Substitute Standard." "That's a terrible name." "It's an honest name." Hyde sets down the prototype and returns to his drafting table. "I have 38 days until the testing board meets. The weapon fires. I put 200 rounds through it already without a malfunction. But I need to optimize the manufacturing process, finalize the part specifications, and build 3 more prototypes for durability testing." Sampson nods. "What do you need from me?" "Machine time, access to the stamping presses, and workers who won't tell me I'm crazy for welding a gun together like it's an automobile exhaust pipe." "You're crazy, but you might also be right. I'll clear the schedule. You'll have everything you need." After Sampson leaves, Hyde works through the night. The prototype sits on the bench beside him, ugly and ungainly and perfect in its simplicity. He thinks about the soldiers who will carry this weapon, if the Army approves it. Young men who don't care about walnut stocks or polished receivers. Young men who just need something that works when they squeeze the trigger, when their lives depend on sustained fire in conditions that would make a gunsmith weep. The Thompson is a masterpiece. Hyde's design is a tool. And in 1943, tools are what America needs. By dawn, he's completed the revised manufacturing specifications. The per-unit cost, including materials, labor, and overhead, $18.50. He's done it. February 16, 1943, Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland. The testing board convenes in the same frozen bunker where Colonel Studler gave Hyde his impossible assignment 2 months ago. But today the audience is larger and considerably more hostile. 7 ordnance officers sit at a long table, their uniforms crisp, their expressions skeptical. They've seen countless weapons proposals during this war, ambitious designs that worked beautifully on paper and catastrophically in practice. Their job is to say no until someone gives them a reason to say yes. Hyde stands beside his three prototype weapons, mounted on a display table. He hasn't bothered to polish them or dress them up. They look exactly like what they are, stamped metal welded together with all the aesthetic appeal of industrial plumbing. Colonel Studler opens the session. Gentlemen, this is Mr. George Hyde of Inland Manufacturing. He's presenting a proposed substitute standard submachine gun designed to manufacturing specifications we provided in December. Mr. Hyde, you may proceed. Hyde doesn't use notes. The weapon before you is chambered in 45 ACP, feeds from a 30-round detachable box magazine, and operates on a straight blowback system. Rate of fire is 400 rounds per minute. Weight unloaded is 7 pounds 8 ounces. Overall length with stock extended is 29 inches, collapsed is 22 inches. The weapon consists of 47 parts, only 5 of which require precision machining. Estimated manufacturing cost is $18.50 per unit. One of the officers, a major named Patterson, interrupts immediately. $18.50? That's impossible. The Thompson costs $200. The Thompson requires precision machining for every major component, Hyde replies. This weapon uses stamped sheet metal for the receiver, trigger housing, and magazine. The only machined parts are the bolt, barrel, firing pin, ejector, and trigger mechanism. Manufacturing time is reduced from 40 hours to approximately 90 minutes. Patterson picks up one of the prototypes. He turns it over in his hands, examining the welded seams, the crude finish, the complete absence of traditional gunsmithing. His expression suggests he's handling something that died several days ago. This is what you're proposing we give to American soldiers? This looks like something a resistance fighter would build in a basement workshop. The welds are visible. The metal is unfinished. There's no stock furniture, no grip panels. It's not even painted properly. Correct, Hyde says. Every element you've identified as lacking is an element that costs time and money without improving function. Another officer, Captain Brennan, joins the criticism. The Thompson has been proven in combat since 1918. It's reliable, accurate, and respected by troops. You're asking us to replace that with this. He gestures at the prototype with barely concealed disgust. What happens when this tin can breaks in the field? What happens when the welds fail under stress? Then we'll find out during testing, which is why we're here. Studler intervenes. Gentlemen, Mr. Hyde has met the design specifications we provided. The weapon deserves a fair trial. I suggest we proceed to the firing range. The group moves outside into the bitter February wind. A test soldier, Corporal James Mitchell, a career infantryman, waits at the firing line with boxes of 45 ACP ammunition. Mitchell has fired thousands of rounds through various submachine guns during his service. He's the kind of practical soldier who cares more about function than appearance. Hyde hands Mitchell the first prototype. The magazine inserts from below. Pull the bolt handle back to chamber a round. The selector switch on the left side of the receiver, forward for safe, middle for semi-automatic, rear for full automatic. The stock telescopes, press the release button, and pull. Mitchell examines the weapon with professional interest. He extends the stock, checks the sights, feels the weight and balance. Then he loads a magazine, chambers around, and flips the selector to full automatic. Whenever you're ready, Corporal, Studler says. Mitchell aims downrange at a series of man-sized targets at 50 yards. He squeezes the trigger. The weapon roars to life with a distinctive, slower cadence than the Thompson's rapid chatter. 400 rounds per minute means the individual shots are more distinguishable, more controllable. Mitchell fires a 5-second burst, adjusts his aim, fires again. At 50 yards, the rounds cluster around center mass on the targets. Not precision marksmanship, but devastating combat effectiveness. He fires the entire 30-round magazine, then immediately loads another full magazine, then another. 90 rounds in rapid succession without a single malfunction. The barrel heats up, the receiver grows warm, but the weapon keeps firing. Patterson steps forward. "Let me see that." Mitchell hands over the weapon, barrel still hot. Patterson examines it closely, looking for signs of stress, warping, failure. The welds hold, the stamped metal shows no deformation. He reluctantly returns it to Mitchell. "Continue firing," Studler orders. "I want 500 rounds through that weapon before we stop." Mitchell complies. Magazine after magazine, the weapon performs flawlessly. The officers watch in silence as their skepticism gradually transforms into something else, not enthusiasm yet, but a grudging acknowledgement that Hyde's ugly gun actually works. After 500 rounds, Studler calls for the torture tests. They drag the weapon through mud. They submerge it in a water tank. They pack sand into the receiver and trigger mechanism. Each time, Mitchell shakes it out, loads a fresh magazine, and fires. The weapon keeps working. They test it in a refrigeration chamber at 10 degrees Fahrenheit. It works. They heat it to 120 degrees. It works. They drop it from 6 feet onto concrete. Once, twice, 3 times. Mitchell picks it up, chambers around, and fires. It works. Captain Brennan, who was most vocal in his criticism, finally speaks. "What happens when something breaks? The Thompson can be field stripped and repaired by any competent armorer." Hyde nods to Mitchell, who sets the weapon on a table. In less than 30 seconds, without tools, Mitchell disassembles it into 7 major components: barrel assembly, receiver, bolt, trigger housing, magazine, stock, and recoil spring assembly. He lays them out neatly, then reassembles the weapon in another 30 seconds. The parts count is low enough that field maintenance is simple. And because the weapon is so inexpensive to manufacture, we can afford to stock spare parts liberally. If something breaks beyond field repair, replace the entire weapon. At $18.50 per unit, they're essentially disposable. Major Patterson winces at the word disposable. In his military tradition, weapons are treasured objects, maintained for decades, passed down through generations of service. The idea of a throwaway gun offends his sense of proper military order. But Colonel Studler is smiling. He's done the mathematics that Patterson hasn't yet considered. $18.50 per unit means America can arm 5 soldiers with Hyde's weapon for the price of 1 Thompson. And if manufacturing time is 90 minutes instead of 40 hours, production capacity increases by a factor of 25. Mr. Hyde, how quickly can you begin mass production if this weapon is approved? Inland Manufacturing can deliver 10,000 units within 60 days of receiving a contract. After that, production scales to 20,000 per month with existing tooling. If you allocate additional stamping presses and welding equipment, we can reach 50,000 per month by the end of the year. 50,000 per month. The number hangs in the frozen air like a promise. The Thompson's maximum production rate, even with dedicated facilities, is 12,000 per month, and that requires diverting skilled machinists from other critical manufacturing. Studler looks at his fellow officers. The skepticism hasn't entirely vanished, but it's been tempered by the undeniable evidence of what they just witnessed. An ugly gun that works reliably, that works cheaply, that works at scale. Gentlemen, I'm recommending immediate adoption with field trials in combat conditions. If this weapon performs in actual combat, as it has performed here today, we proceed to full-scale production. Objections? Patterson hesitates, then shakes his head. The other officers follow his lead. They don't like Hyde's weapon, but they can't argue with its performance. Hyde allows himself a small smile. His heretical design has passed the first test. The real test will come when soldiers use it in combat. when lives depend on those ugly welds and stamped metal components holding together under conditions far worse than any proving ground can simulate. July 10th, 1943. USS Monrovia, off the coast of Gela, Sicily. The Mediterranean night is moonless and electric with tension. In the troop hold of the USS Monrovia, Private First Class Robert Hendricks sits on his bunk, checking his equipment for the fifth time in an hour. Around him, 200 men from the 1st Infantry Division prepare for the invasion of Sicily, Operation Husky. The air is thick with cigarette smoke, nervous sweat, and whispered prayers. Hendricks is 22 years old, a factory worker from Pittsburgh who's been in the Army for 11 months. He's never fired a weapon in combat. Tonight, that changes. Beside him on the bunk sits his assigned weapon, one of George Hyde's submachine guns, fresh from the inland manufacturing production line. The Army has officially designated it the M3. The soldiers have given it a different name, the grease gun, because it looks exactly like the pneumatic grease guns used in automotive repair shops. Hendricks heard some of the veteran sergeants complaining about it, saying it looked like junk compared to the Thompsons they carried in North Africa. He doesn't care what it looks like, he just hopes it works. Staff Sergeant Bill Coleman moves through the hold, checking his squad. Coleman is a Thompson man, carried one through the invasion of North Africa, trusts it like he trusts his right arm. He stops beside Hendricks and eyes the M3 with undisguised skepticism. "You know how to use that thing, Hendricks?" "Yes, Sergeant. Magazine in the bottom, pull the bolt, flip the selector switch." "It jams on you, you're dead. Simple as that." "Yes, Sergeant." Coleman moves on. Hendricks runs his hands over the M3's stamped metal receiver, feeling the rough welds, the utilitarian construction. It weighs almost nothing compared to the Garand rifle he trained with. The wire stock extends with a simple button press. The whole weapon feels like something that shouldn't work, that violates every expectation of how a military firearm should feel in your hands. At 0245 hours, the call comes. "Landing craft away!" The men file up to the main deck in ordered chaos. The night sky erupts periodically with anti-aircraft fire as German defenders respond to Allied air bombardment. Hendricks climbs down the cargo net into the Higgins boat, his M3 slung across his chest, 6 30-round magazines in his webbing. The landing craft pulls away from the Monrovia and heads toward the dark coastline of Sicily. The boat ride takes 30 minutes. 30 minutes of men vomiting from seasickness and fear, of diesel fumes and salt spray, of silence broken only by the engine roar and the distant thunder of naval guns pounding the beach. Hendricks grips his M3 tighter with each passing minute. At 0320 hours, the landing craft hits the beach at Gela. The ramp drops. Sergeant Coleman screams, "Move! Move! Move!" Hendricks charges down the ramp into knee-deep water. Immediately, the beach explodes with machine gun fire. Tracers arc through the darkness like lethal fireflies. Men fall, hit before they reach the sand. Hendricks runs through the surf, every instinct screaming at him to drop and find cover. He makes it to the beach and throws himself behind a destroyed pillbox. 3 other soldiers from his squad pile in beside him. The German machine gun fire is coming from a concrete bunker 60 yards ahead, sweeping the beach in methodical bursts that kick up sand and find flesh. "We're pinned!" someone shouts. Coleman appears beside them, with his Thompson already firing short bursts toward the bunker. "Hendricks! Suppressing fire on that bunker! Now!" Hendricks rises to a crouch, extends the wire stock of the M3, and flips the selector to full automatic. He aims at the bunker's firing slit and squeezes the trigger. The M3 roars to life. The slower rate of fire, 400 rounds per minute instead of the Thompson's 700, makes the weapon surprisingly controllable. Hendricks keeps the muzzle on target as the .45 caliber rounds hammer against the concrete around the firing slit. He fires the entire 30-round magazine in controlled bursts, then drops behind cover to reload. His hands are shaking. He fumbles the new magazine, drops it in the sand, picks it up, slams it home, chamber around, rise, fire again. Beside him, Coleman is firing his Thompson with the precision of a veteran. But then Coleman's weapon stops. Jam. Coleman drops, pulling the bolt back, checking the chamber. "Goddamn sand!" he snarls. Hendricks keeps firing. The M3 doesn't care about the sand. The loose tolerances that made it look cheap on the proving ground now prove their worth in combat. Sand that would clog the Thompson's precisely fitted parts just rattles through the M3's stamped metal receiver and falls out. Another soldier, Private Garcia, rises with his M3 and adds his fire to Hendricks. 2 streams of 45 ACP rounds pour into the bunker. The German machine gun goes silent. "Move up!" Coleman shouts, his Thompson still disassembled. Hendricks and Garcia run forward in a low crouch, their M3s ready. They reach the bunker and take position on either side of the entrance. Garcia pulls a grenade, yanks the pin, and tosses it through the bunker's doorway. The explosion is muffled, but definitive. Coleman and the rest of the squad catch up. Coleman has his Thompson working again, but he looks at Hendricks's M3 with new respect. That piece of junk saved our asses. The battle for Gela continues through the dawn and into the brutal heat of the Sicilian day. Hendricks fires his M3 in street fighting, house-to-house clearing, desperate close-quarters combat, where the weapon's compact size and reliability matter more than precision or appearance. He drags it through dust and blood. He fires it until a barrel glows. It never stops working. That night, as the survivors of the first wave dig in around Gela, Hendricks sits in a captured German trench and field strips his M3. 7 major components, no tools required. He wipes them down with an oily rag, reassembles the weapon, chambers around to test function. Perfect. Sergeant Coleman approaches with a canteen and sits beside him. Coleman's Thompson lies across his lap, freshly cleaned and oiled. "You know what the old-timers are saying about your grease gun?" Coleman asks. "That it's ugly?" "That it's ugly," Coleman agrees. "That it looks like junk. That it's an insult to real weapons." He pauses, takes a drink from the canteen. "But it works. When my Thompson jammed on that beach, your M3 kept firing. That's all that matters." Word spreads through the division. The M3, the grease gun, the ugly stepchild of American firearms, has performed flawlessly on the beaches of Sicily. In the after-action reports, officers note that the M3 had significantly fewer malfunctions than the Thompson under combat conditions. The stamped metal construction, the loose tolerances, the crude appearance, all the things that ordnance officers winced at Aberdeen Proving Ground, proved to be advantages in actual combat. September 3, 1943. War Department, Washington, D.C. Colonel Studler reads the field reports from Sicily, then from the subsequent invasion of mainland Italy at Salerno. The data is overwhelming. The M3's malfunction rate is less than half the Thompson's. Soldier feedback is positive. The weapon works in conditions that defeat more expensive, more precisely manufactured firearms. Studler signs the order for full-scale production. Inland Manufacturing will produce 50,000 M3 submachine guns per month. Other manufacturers, Guide Lamp Division, Ithaca Gun Company, will be brought online to increase production. The goal: produce enough M3s to completely replace the Thompson as the standard American submachine gun by the end of 1944. George Hyde, working in his Dayton workshop, receives a telegram from the War Department. It's brief and bureaucratic, but the meaning is clear. His weapon has been vindicated. The ugly gun that ordnance officers called junk, that violated every traditional principle of firearms manufacturing, that looked like it was made in a prison workshop, that weapon has proven itself in the only laboratory that matters: combat. Hyde doesn't celebrate. He returns to his drafting table, already working on improvements: a redesigned magazine catch, a simplified bolt handle, Minor refinements that will shave another dollar off the manufacturing cost, another minute off the production time. Because the war is far from over, and there are still millions of soldiers who need weapons that work.